I walked into the school expecting just another parent-teacher night. But when I stepped into the auditorium, I saw her, my first love, the girl who broke my heart 15 years ago. Her brown eyes locked with mine, and in an instant the noise around us disappeared. I didn't know whether to smile, to run, or finally ask the question that's haunted me ever since she left. The evening air nipped at Daniel's cheeks as he and Lily crossed the parking lot, the kind of crisp autumn cool that made breath look like quiet smoke. Through the school's glass doors, the auditorium glowed, rows of tables, bright posters taped to cinder block walls, the faint smell of fresh paint and drip coffee rising with the hum of voices. Daniel adjusted the collar of his plain blue shirt, then smoothed the crease that never quite lay flat on his sleeve. He'd come straight from the shop. A thin shadow of motor oil still traced the whorls of his knuckles despite the scrub. Lily's small hand swung in his, light and insistent. "Daddy," she whispered, eyes shining under the fluorescent lights. "Miss Carter says there's a surprise tonight." "A surprise, huh?" Daniel bent to her level, his voice lowering into a conspiratorial murmur. "Maybe it's extra recess for excellent artists." He tapped the strap of her backpack. "Or maybe someone's been reading so well that the library ran out of books." She grinned, gap-toothed and fearless. "You always say that." "Because it's always almost true." He tried to make his smile easy, but the weight of the week tugged at it. Another long day, another list half finished, and still the quiet hope that parent-teacher night would tell him he wasn't failing at the balancing act he performed every hour: mechanic, cook, tutor, bedtime storyteller. He'd come to measure himself by Lily's joy. When she laughed, the scale tipped toward okay. They stepped inside. The space was bright and busy. Teachers seated in a patient line behind name placards, parents clustered in gentle knots, the skitter of kids' sneakers across the floor as they darted past the "Please Walk" sign. Daniel scanned for the art displays he knew Lily wanted to show him. Hand-painted leaves, crayon turkeys with careful, serious eyes, watercolor planets that bled at the edges in lovely ways. Lily tugged him toward a bulletin board. "That one's mine," she announced, pointing to a picture with a tiny signature in the corner: Lily T. A house with sunlit windows, a big oak, a small figure holding a taller hand. Daniel's throat tightened, the kind of ache that felt like gratitude and fear in equal measure. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. "You got the front step exactly right." "You always sit there when you're tired," she replied, matter of fact. "But then you say, 'Okay, kiddo, one more story,' and you get up." He laughed softly. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything," she said, proud. A volunteer offered them paper cups of coffee and hot chocolate. Daniel took coffee he didn't really want, more to have something for his hands to do. The room felt louder for a moment, then settled into a murmur again. He could pick out the conversations if he tried. Math facts, reading levels, "She's really coming out of her shell. We're working on sharing." Ordinary sentences that meant everything to the people saying them. "Do you think Miss Carter will say I'm good at art?" Lily asked, voice small now, as if the question might crack if handled wrong. "I think Miss Carter will say you try hard and care deeply," Daniel answered, slow and careful. "And that's better than any good." She nodded like she understood, then leaned into his side. He felt the fine weight of her head against his hip, the press of trust. The auditorium lights hummed, steady and bright. They joined the line for Lily's class. As they waited, Daniel rubbed his thumb over the cardboard rim of his cup, listening to the scratch of sleeve against sleeve, the soft shush of a custodian's broom somewhere down the hall. He glanced at the name cards ahead: 3rd grade, 4th grade, measuring distance in the way a person who fixes things measures the gap between problem and solution. He told himself tonight was simple: show up, listen, take notes, say thank you. No one needed him to be more than he was already trying to be. Lily rocked on her heels. "Miss Carter said the surprise is something everyone will like," she whispered, unable to contain it. "Then I'm already a fan," he said. "I like things everyone likes." She giggled. "You like greasy sandwiches." "Those are universally beloved," he protested. Their laughter blended with the room's easy noise. A parent ahead moved aside, and the line edged forward. Daniel shifted, balancing the cup, the backpack strap, the rush of a day that hadn't quite let go of him. He breathed in coffee, paint, a trace of new paper, and let the breath out slow. When he finally lifted his eyes toward the far end of the room, toward the table with the neat stack of progress folders and the teacher Lily talked about every afternoon, something in his chest braced without his permission. He couldn't have said why, only that the air felt a notch cooler, the lights a fraction brighter, as if the room were tilting him toward a moment he hadn't planned to meet. "Ready?" he asked, mostly to steady himself. Lily gave his hand a squeeze that traveled straight to his heart. "Ready," she said. They took the last few steps together. Daniel's attention drifted as the line inched forward. He tried to anchor himself in the rhythm of small talk around him. The words, "progress report," "doing well in math," "we're so proud." It was the same steady chorus he'd expected to hear tonight. Nothing more, nothing less. But when he finally lifted his gaze toward the end of the row, his world shifted. She was there. Emma Carter. His chest tightened instantly, as if memory had stolen the air from him. She stood tall at the far table, her posture perfectly balanced between authority and welcome. The glow of the overhead lights caught the sheen of her black suit, crisp and precise, like it had been chosen with intent. Her chestnut brown hair, once a perpetual ponytail in their college days, now flowed in deliberate waves that framed her face with elegance. And her eyes, those hazel eyes he once knew better than his own reflection, still held the same spark, though now sharpened by years of experience. Time folded in on itself. 15 years dissolved, and Daniel was 20 again, standing in the chill of a campus night, kissing her under a sky thick with stars. He could almost hear the echo of her laughter in the quiet spaces of his mind, could almost remember the promise she whispered back then. "We'll build a life together, you and me." Then the silence that followed when she vanished without a word. Daniel's stride faltered. He gripped Lily's hand too tightly, and she looked up at him with a puzzled frown. He forced his fingers to relax. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Nothing, sweetheart," he whispered, though his voice cracked. "Just nothing." Emma's eyes met his across the room. For one suspended heartbeat, the noise of the auditorium dimmed. No parents, no children, no announcements, just that unbroken line of recognition stretching between them. She froze. Her lips parted slightly, as if she had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Daniel felt heat climb his neck. He looked away too quickly, pretending to be absorbed in the stack of handouts on the next table. His heart thundered. Should he smile? Should he acknowledge her? Should he turn on his heel and leave before she could say anything? 15 years of questions pressed down on him in a single instant. "Daddy," Lily tugged, pointing. "That's Miss Carter, my teacher. She's the surprise." The name hit like a wave. Miss Carter. His Emma. He blinked, stunned by the collision of worlds. The woman who left him, the girl who broke him, and the teacher who praised his daughter's drawings. Fate wasn't just nudging, it was writing in bold strokes. Emma turned toward the microphone at her table, her voice carrying across the room, confident and practiced. "Welcome, parents. Tonight we're excited to share your children's achievements." Her tone was smooth, but when her gaze swept past him again, Daniel caught the smallest tremor. He wondered if anyone else noticed. He doubted it, but he did. The line moved forward. Lily's chatter filled the space between his thoughts, yet he couldn't hear her words. All he could hear was the pounding question inside him. Why now? Why her? Why here? He swallowed hard, forcing a polite expression as he guided Lily closer to Emma's table. Inside, though, the world he had so carefully built for himself, a world of work, routine, and Lily's bright laughter, tilted on its axis. Because Emma wasn't just a memory anymore. She was here, flesh and blood, and for the first time in years, Daniel realized he was not ready for the story he had never finished. The closer Daniel and Lily came to Emma's table, the louder the blood roared in his ears. He tried to steady his breath, to act like just another parent waiting his turn. But when Lily bounced up to the desk, eyes glowing, Daniel felt his entire body tighten. Emma's hand, elegant fingers resting on a stack of folders, paused ever so slightly before she raised her gaze to meet his. "Mr. Thompson," she said with practiced warmth, her voice carrying the same polished authority she'd just used to welcome the entire auditorium. Yet Daniel noticed it, the half-second delay, the flick of her eyes from Lily back to him. For all her composure, the name seemed to catch in her throat. He forced a polite nod, swallowing against the knot forming there. Miss Carter. The words sounded wrong in his mouth, too formal, too distant. But anything else would have betrayed too much. Her title, not her name, was safer. He hid behind it like armor. Lily climbed into the chair beside her teacher, clutching her folder as though it contained treasure. Miss Carter says I read the fastest in the class, she announced proudly, glancing between them, oblivious to the current of tension humming in the air. That's right, Emma confirmed, her smile softening as she leaned toward Lily. And not only that, but your art projects are some of the most creative I've seen. You think in colors most children don't even notice. She handed Lily a piece of paper, an evaluation form filled with careful notes. Her voice stayed steady, yet Daniel saw her knuckles whiten as she slid the folder across. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to focus on the words rather than the past. She's always drawing at home. Half my kitchen table is covered in sketches. He offered it lightly, as if conversation came easily, though his tone was clipped. Emma nodded, but her eyes lingered on him a fraction longer than necessary. You must encourage that. Creativity like hers should never be stifled. I do what I can, Daniel replied, almost sharper than he intended. The edge in his voice startled even him. He softened, glancing down at Lily. She makes it easy. Emma shifted in her seat, smoothing the corner of the folder. She's thriving, she said carefully. Kind, empathetic, determined. You should be proud. A beat, then quieter. I mean that, Daniel. The use of his name cracked something inside him. He looked up sharply, but she had already returned her attention to Lily, praising her reading scores, suggesting books that might challenge her more. Daniel listened, nodded at the right times, and scribbled notes he'd never need, just to keep his hands busy. But beneath the surface, memory clawed its way forward, late nights studying side by side, whispered promises under blankets of stars, the hollow ache of her sudden disappearance. Every syllable she spoke now layered over that history like thin paper trying to cover stone. Lily beamed under Emma's praise, her laughter bursting out when Emma joked about running out of shelf space for her drawings. Daniel smiled too, but his jaw remained tight. He couldn't reconcile the polished professional in front of him with the girl who once swore she'd never let him go. When the meeting wound down and parents began filtering toward the exits, Daniel rose quickly, eager to disappear into the crowd. Thank you, Miss Carter, he said, his voice clipped again, formal to the last. He reached for Lily's backpack, already turning away. But her gaze caught him, an unspoken plea in those hazel eyes. A flicker of regret? Of longing? He didn't know, and he didn't want to risk finding out. He gave a stiff nod and took Lily's hand. Daddy, she said I'm like a real artist, Lily whispered proudly as they stepped aside. Daniel bent to kiss her hair, hiding the storm in his eyes. Emma's voice echoed in his mind, low and steady. You should be proud. And though he was, prouder than he could ever say, the pride tangled with old wounds he thought had scarred over long ago. Tonight had ripped them open, and no careful smile could hide the sting. The crowd in the auditorium had thinned, conversations dissolving into the shuffle of coats and the squeak of sneakers on polished linoleum. Parents carried their children's artwork like trophies, laughter echoing down the hallways. Daniel kept his head low, weaving through the flow of families with Lily's hands safely clasped in his. He wanted nothing more than to reach the door, to step into the cool night, and let the air wash away the heat still burning in his chest. He was 3 strides from escape when her voice reached him. Daniel, wait. It was soft, almost fragile, but it carried across the emptying room and halted him as surely as if someone had tugged on his sleeve. He froze, his back stiff, his grip tightening on Lily's hand. Slowly, too slowly, he turned. Emma stood by her desk, fingers curled around the edge as though she needed its solidity. The overhead light caught the faint tremor in her lips. It's been a long time, she said. Not Miss Carter now, not the practiced formality of a teacher, but Emma, her voice quieter, more personal. Daniel gave a short, bitter laugh that startled even him. 15 years qualifies as long. He met her eyes, steady and unblinking. Yeah, I'd say it does. Emma flinched, just slightly, as if the weight of the years had landed all at once. I never meant for it to happen the way it did. Then why did it? His words weren't loud, but they cut. His voice was low, even, controlled, the kind of calm that carried more force than shouting ever could. For a heartbeat, he saw her struggle for an answer. Her mouth opened, then closed again, her gaze dropping to the floor. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the distant chatter of a custodian stacking chairs. Daniel felt the ache of old anger pressing at the edges of his composure. He wanted to demand answers, to finally put words to the betrayal that had haunted him. But Lily tugged at his arm, her laughter rising as she darted forward, waving a drawing she'd snatched from the display board. "Look, Daddy, Miss Carter says I draw like a real artist." Her eyes sparkled as she thrust the paper into his hands. A crooked tree, a bright sun, two figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. Daniel knelt to hug her, pressing his face into her hair to hide the storm tightening his chest. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice rough. "Absolutely beautiful." Emma watched them, her expression softening into something unguarded, vulnerable. She saw the man kneeling before his daughter, steadying her world with tired hands and quiet devotion. And she remembered the boy who once whispered about a future together. Her throat tightened with words she didn't know how to speak. When Daniel rose, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder, he found Emma still watching. Their eyes locked for a brief, searing moment. She wanted to say something, anything, but all she managed was a faint smile that faltered at the edges. "Good night, Miss Carter," he said, slipping the formality back between them like a barrier. He guided Lily toward the door, each step heavier than the last. Emma remained by her desk, her hand sliding slowly from its edge. Around her, the room felt cavernous, emptied of noise and motion. She had built an empire, filled boardrooms, commanded respect. Yet in this quiet moment, with Daniel's back retreating into the hall, she felt small, just a woman standing at the edge of a story she had once abandoned. And Daniel, gripping the steering wheel minutes later in the dim light of the car, told himself it was nothing. A coincidence. A reminder of a chapter closed long ago. But deep down, beneath the armor of routine and responsibility, something stirred, a voice whispering that perhaps the story wasn't finished after all. The next morning, Daniel woke to the alarm's harsh buzz and the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The house was quiet except for the soft tick of the kitchen clock and Lily humming upstairs as she got ready for school. He sat at the edge of his bed, elbows braced on his knees, palms pressed together. His mind should have been on the day's schedule, oil changes lined up, a transmission replacement, bills to pay, but it wasn't. It kept circling back to the look in Emma's eyes when she said his name. 15 years, he thought. 15 years of silence, of building a life without her, of raising a daughter who had become his anchor. He had convinced himself he'd buried the past, but one chance encounter had unearthed it all, raw and sharp. He wanted to tell himself it was just coincidence, that she was just a teacher now, just one parent-teacher night in a lifetime of them. But he couldn't ignore the way his chest had tightened, the way old questions rattled back to life. Why had she left? Why without a word? Did he matter so little back then? At the shop later that day, the clang of tools and the smell of grease usually kept him grounded. Not today. While customers described rattles and squeaks, while coworkers joked about football scores, Daniel's thoughts kept drifting. Every now and then he'd catch himself staring too long at nothing, only to shake it off with a muttered excuse. He worked harder, faster, as if the rhythm of labor could drown memory. But memory had its own stubborn rhythm. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep with her sketchbook open on the couch, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at her drawings. Houses, trees, suns, and always two figures, one tall, one small. Never a third. He brushed a hand over the paper, a sigh escaping. "You and me, kiddo," he whispered. "That's all we need." Yet even as he said it, another part of him betrayed him, because the image of Emma's face kept intruding, uninvited. Emma, too, lay awake in her apartment across town, staring at the ceiling. For years she had told herself she'd made the right choice, that leaving had been necessary. Her parents had pushed her into a life mapped by ambition, demanding she sever anything that might slow her ascent. She'd told herself Daniel was too young, too ordinary, too rooted in the kind of small-town dreams that had no place in her future. And yet, when she thought of him, she hadn't seen ordinariness. She had seen safety, warmth, the possibility of belonging. 15 years had passed, and she had built everything her parents once insisted upon. A company, a reputation, a place at the table where decisions shaped futures. But when she closed her eyes, she didn't see any of that. She saw Daniel's smile, earnest, unpolished, steady. She remembered the boy who studied beside her, who believed in her dreams before she even knew how to name them. And now, standing in front of him after so long, she realized how much she had lost. At her office the following day, she stared blankly at a proposal while her assistant asked for approval. She forced herself to nod, to sign, to speak with the same crisp authority everyone expected of her. But when the door closed, her mask slipped. She pressed her fingers to her temples, whispering to herself, "What have I done?" She had thought burying her heart beneath success would be enough. But seeing Daniel, older, tired, holding the hand of a daughter he adored, made her wonder if she had been burying herself instead. For days, both of them moved through routines like sleepwalkers. Daniel fixed cars and cooked dinner. Emma attended meetings and signed contracts. But beneath the surface, both carried the weight of that night in the auditorium. Both asked the same questions in silence. And though neither admitted it aloud, both felt the faintest pull, like gravity reminding them that no matter how far they drifted, their orbits were crossing again. The knock at the door came just as Daniel was wiping flour off his hands. He had been helping Lily with her latest kitchen experiment, sugar cookies shaped into stars and lopsided hearts. The oven's warmth filled the small house, and the scent of butter and vanilla softened the edges of the long week. Lily darted to the door before he could even untie the apron. "Daddy, it's Miss Carter," she called, her voice high with delight. Daniel froze mid-step, the wooden spoon clattering into the sink. Miss Carter. Not Emma, not the ghost of his past, but Lily's teacher standing on the other side of the door. He hesitated for a heartbeat too long, then crossed the room. When he opened the door, Emma stood there in a tailored coat, her hair tucked neatly over one shoulder. She held a small smile, tentative, as though unsure whether it belonged. "Lily invited me," she explained softly, almost apologetic. "She said she wanted to show me her new painting." Daniel glanced down at his daughter, whose hopeful grin left him little choice. "Come in," he said at last, his voice low. He stepped aside, still gripping the edge of the door as if letting go might tip his balance. Emma entered, and at once the warmth of the house wrapped around her. It wasn't grand, no sleek furniture or expensive art like her own apartment, but it radiated comfort. The walls bore Lily's drawings, bright splashes of color taped up proudly. A faint hum of music drifted from the radio in the kitchen. Emma inhaled, catching the buttery sweetness of cookies, and for the first time in years, she felt herself relax. "This is cozy," she murmured, running her fingers lightly along the back of a worn but well-loved armchair. "It feels alive." Lily pulled her toward the dining table where the painting waited, a watercolor of a treehouse, crooked but brimming with imagination. "See? I made this just yesterday. Daddy said it looks like something out of a storybook." Emma bent close, studying the brushstrokes with genuine admiration. "He's right. You have an artist's eye, Lily." Then she looked up at Daniel, catching his gaze before he turned away too quickly. When Lily bounded upstairs to fetch another drawing, the silence thickened. Daniel busied himself at the counter, pouring coffee he hadn't planned to serve. Emma stood quietly, watching him move with the ease of someone who had done everything for too long on his own. The weight of it showed in his shoulders, in the deliberate way he measured sugar for a guest he hadn't expected. Finally, he broke the silence. "Why did you leave, Emma?" "No explanations. No goodbye." His voice was calm, but underneath lay the ache of years. She gripped the edge of the table, her nails pressing faint crescents into the wood. "Because I was scared," she admitted. The words trembled on her lips. "Scared of failing you. Scared I couldn't live up to the future my parents demanded. They wanted me to chase success, and I thought walking away would protect you from the chaos of my world." Her eyes shone now, unblinking. "But it was the biggest mistake of my life." Daniel studied her, jaw tight. For so long he had imagined this moment, pictured the confrontation, the questions spilling out, the accusations sharp as blades. Yet now, hearing her voice crack under the weight of regret, all he felt was exhaustion. "I spent years hating you, Emma," he said at last, his voice rough with honesty. "But tonight, watching you with Lily, I realized something. Maybe we weren't meant to find each other then. Maybe it had to be now." Their eyes locked, And for the first time since the night she left, there was no bitterness. Only the fragile thread of hope. Emma reached across the table, her hand brushing his. He didn't pull away. The warmth of her touch traveled up his arm, unsettling and steadying all at once. Upstairs, Lily's footsteps thumped against the floor, her laughter ringing down the stairs. She peeked around the banister, catching sight of her father and her teacher sitting close, hands nearly joined. A smile spread across her face, innocent and knowing all at once. Emma glanced at Lily, then back to Daniel. And in the quiet glow of that small kitchen, surrounded by paintings and the smell of cookies, they both felt the unmistakable truth. The past hadn't ended their story. It had only paused it. The night had grown late, the kind of quiet that seemed to settle deeper than usual. Outside, the street lamps cast pale circles on the pavement, and inside, the little house carried the hushed stillness of a home winding down. Lily had finally drifted off upstairs, her sketchbook sprawled across her lap, the crayons scattered like tiny stars around her. Daniel had carried her gently to bed, pulling the blanket over her shoulders, pausing a moment longer than usual just to watch her breathe. When he returned to the living room, Emma was waiting, her coat folded neatly over the arm of the chair. She wasn't the poised CEO he had seen at the school, nor the confident professional who could command a boardroom. She sat with her hands clasped in her lap, shoulders curved, her expression bare of all defenses. For the first time in years, she simply looked like Emma, his Emma, the girl who once dreamed under the stars with him. "I don't know how to fix 15 years," she said quietly. "I don't even know where to begin. But I do know this. I never stopped caring. Not once." Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Leaving you broke something in me. I've carried it into every meeting, every achievement, every night I went home alone. And tonight, being here, seeing you with Lily, it's the first time I've felt like maybe I can breathe again." Daniel stood by the doorway, arms crossed, not out of anger, but to hold himself steady. Her words scraped across wounds he had long buried. He thought of the lonely years, the nights he had gone without sleep wondering what he had done wrong. The mornings when Lily's small voice had been the only thing that got him out of bed. He wanted to cling to that anger, to protect himself with it. But instead, what rose inside him was something gentler, though no less fierce. The realization that his heart still recognized her. "I can't pretend those years didn't happen," he said finally, his voice low. "I can't erase the nights I hated you for walking away. But maybe we weren't ready back then. Maybe we're different now." He let out a breath that felt heavier than air. "And maybe that's the only way this could ever work." Emma's eyes glistened, and she reached out, hesitant, her hand trembling slightly. He didn't make her wait. Daniel stepped forward and let his rough, work-worn fingers slide into hers. The warmth between them was fragile, but it was real. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't the old silence, the one filled with absence and unanswered questions. This was something else, softer, filled with the possibility of rebuilding. Emma brushed a tear from her cheek with her free hand, laughing shakily at herself. "Look at me, the big CEO who can handle mergers and crises, crying like a schoolgirl." Daniel gave a faint smile, the kind that reached his eyes for the first time all evening. "You're allowed to be human, Emma. I think I almost forgot you were." Upstairs, a small creak gave them away. Lily peeking from the top of the stairs, her eyes wide and curious. She didn't understand the full weight of what was happening, but she saw enough. Her father's hand in her teacher's, the softness in their smiles, the sense of something new taking root. She hugged her stuffed rabbit close, whispering to herself, "They look happy," before slipping back to bed with a smile. Emma exhaled, as though she too had been holding her breath for years. Daniel squeezed her hand once, firmly, grounding both of them in the moment. "Maybe," he said quietly, "life doesn't just give you one story. Sometimes it gives you a second chance." The words lingered in the air, simple but certain. And in the warmth of that modest living room, with the scent of cookies still hanging in the air and the echoes of laughter tucked into the walls, they both understood. The future wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about beginning again, here and now, together.